Hey everybody, what we're going to talk about today is something that I really struggled with when I was learning how to produce, and especially as I switched into the whole DAWless thing, because it's not quite as obvious to figure out in the DAWless world, and that is how to get a really clean sound and not a muddy, cluttered sound by using what's called gain staging. We hear a lot about gain staging, and people talk about it as if everybody should already know what it is. And it was one of the things that I struggled with, was finding actually really good information about what gain staging is, why it's important, how it works, and how you can use it to your advantage. So what we're going to talk about today is gain staging and how you can use it to your advantage in hopefully the clearest way possible. So what is gain staging? Basically, in a nutshell, it's controlling the strength of your signal and each one of your signals of your whole mix from the very beginning where the sound is produced all the way to the end when it comes out of your final mix with all of the other sounds mixed in. If you control that level of sound all the way through, you avoid getting distortion and things into that signal, other harmonics and other sounds in there that you don't want. It gives you better control over things. It keeps you from getting a bunch of extra stuff in there that clutter up the sonic spectrum, from low frequency waves to high frequency waves. And so you can have very clean, specific sounds that aren't overlapping with a bunch of pieces of them that you don't necessarily want in there. When you push a signal past it's kind of past 0 dB, you run the risk of that signal distorting. And when you get digital distortion into things, unlike analog distortion, when you get digital distortion, it can sound pretty ugly, it can mess things up, and it can really clutter up the mix that you have. So the idea is to control that from the start, keep from introducing it at any point along the way by controlling your signal strength. And we do that through gain staging. So if you want to keep your signal from clipping, can't you just turn it down? Well, the reality is you can, but you need to do it at every step along the way. Every single place where there is anything new added in, like a new effect, anything that adds more strength, more power to that signal, needs to be controlled at every step of the way. And we're going to go actually into a DAW in here in just a minute. I know this is a DAWless video, but I want to be able to show you graphically so you can see a little bit what I'm talking about how you can introduce that distortion, that harmful distortion along the way without making the signal louder. So it will appear as if you are not clipping, but you're clipping within the signal chain. And so you're introducing mud into your mix. What's the difference between gain and volume? In a nutshell, gain is your signal coming into a channel, a plug-in, something like that, and your volume is your level going out of the other side. Sometimes they're both called gain, sometimes you've got gain and trim, things like that. But to keep it simple, gain is basically the signal coming in, the power of the signal coming into a thing, and your volume is the power going out of the end of it. So you can actually reduce the gain coming into a signal if the signal is coming in too powerful from the thing before it in the chain, whether it's the signal coming from one instrument through another instrument in a DAWless setup, or whether it's a signal coming from a virtual synthesizer through an effects plugin inside a DAW. You can control that gain coming in so you're getting the signal exactly the strength that you want it coming into an effect. Then you can affect it, and then you can control the volume or the level or the gain of that signal coming out the other end, as well as it goes into your next effect in the chain or your next piece of the chain. And why this is important is you want to make sure that you're keeping each of your signals from each of your instruments as clean as possible from start to finish. Anywhere you introduce digital distortion into the process, you're going to run the risk of adding in extra sounds, extra waves, extra frequencies, extra harmonics that you don't want to have or that you can't control in your final mix. And those are the things that clutter up and muddy up your sound and keep it from being nice and clean in the end. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to jump real quick into Ableton Live so I can show you what gain staging looks like graphically, so you can see what the effects of it are throughout a chain and how it's not just volume. And then we're going to jump back into the DAWless setup a little bit here so we can talk about within the Elektron machines and within my DAWless setup how all of the gain works, because each one of these machines has multiple places where you can introduce volume or power or overdrive or distortion or gain. All of those things affect that signal, so you want to make sure you're controlling that as well, start to finish. So we'll go into the DAW first, and then we'll be right back to the DAWless setup. Okay, so here we are in Ableton, and we've got just a basic hi-hat sound, closed hi-hat sound, and you can hear it's kind of a clean hit. If you notice, we are not clipping here on our levels. The levels are green, master, as well as the individual channel level. And if we add some distortion and saturation, see that it really pushes the sound up. And if you look into the EQ, you're going to see the full spectrum completely taken up with sound and all well above 0 dB. So you've got a lot of extra harmonics and extra distortion that are in there that you don't need. We can add another one. You can add a utility with a bunch of gain as well. And if you'll notice, on each one of these on the utility, you've got red, it's clipping. And then in the saturator, you've got red, it's clipping. And then coming out of the EQ, you've got red, it's clipping. But if you notice on the channel, we're able to lower this down. We've got no clipping at all, looks fine. The master channel over here, not clipping at all, looks fine. So you would think that there was no distortion in here because there's no red, there's no clipping anywhere to be found. But the problem is the clipping is within the channel. So if you turn it up just a little so you can hear it a little better, you can hear all of that gross, awful distortion. But if we start to pull back out and get back to our clean sound, that's the sound we wanted to start off with. So we introduced a whole bunch of bad distortion, clipping, and overdrive into this and created a whole bunch of extra harmonics. Now, if you look onto the EQ8 down here at the bottom, you can see that there's a lot of space within that spectrum, and we're actually louder than we were before. So all of those things, all of that extra distortion that's in there comes from poor gain staging. So if you were to add in, say, one of these things, let's add in the saturator here, but we turn the drive down and we turn the output gain down. So you can still get some saturation, but without driving the signal. And then you can increase the gain at the end and get some extra volume out of the signal. So you have a lot more control over it when you're doing it piece by piece throughout the process than you do if you overdrive all those signals and get it to the point where you've got a whole bunch of distortion here within the signal. But you've still got the volume right here in the middle. You can take that volume way down. And you would think that there's nothing in there. But when you turn it up, you can hear where all that kind of mess is in the process. So as you saw when we were in the DAW, introducing additional distortion because you overdrive something at any point in the process is going to introduce clutter or mud into your final mix. Now, it's easy enough to see and to deal with when you're dealing inside a DAW because you can always turn down the output gain of an individual plugin, or you can put a utility if you're in Ableton Live after something that doesn't have an output gain, and you can use that to trim the gain back down again in between plugins so that the signal going into the next plugin is clean and not overdriven. So you can manage that all along every step of the way. But what do you do when you're in a DAWless scenario and you've got the same kind of a chain going through, the same kind of a sonic chain, starting from one of your machines, going through other machines, going through effects, going through, amplification and, distortion or overdrive or reverbs or things like that, that all add additional gain to that signal. But you want to make sure that at the end, you've got a nice clean signal coming out. And the answer to that is gain staging. You want to stage your gain all the way along the way. You want to make sure that you are adjusting on each step of the process. Now, in a DAWless scenario, you're going to be doing it in different machines, where within the DAW, you're going to be doing it within different plugins or adding different plugins, but it's still the same principle. You still have a sound that's going through a chain of effects or a chain of processing or a chain of amplification, and then you want it to come out the other end as clean as you can possibly have it. And the best way to do that, whether it's DAWless or whether it's in a DAW, is to manage it from the beginning, from the initiation of the sound all the way through, and only introduce overdrive if you want to do that, and if you want to do that to a signal in a controlled way. And then you can control the volume of the overdrive, so you can overdrive a signal and bring the volume back down, so you get the interesting sounds that's created by, for example, an overdrive, but you don't add any unwanted distortion or clipping or overdrive into your chain. You only do it in a controlled way, in a way that you actually want to do it when you want to do it, keeping control of everything. All right, so just a real quick example here. We have a simple percussion tone coming from the Digitakt, and within this we have a bunch of different places where we can gain stage this signal. So from the trigger menu, we've got the velocity, which can hear that adds volume to it. Then within the source, we've got the level, another place where in that path we add some volume if we choose. Then on the amp page, we've got the amp volume, and we've also got overdrive. Both opportunities to add volume as well. Okay. And then even on your master compressor, you have a makeup gain, which if you're using the compressor, that's a place where you can get additional volume from it as well. So all the way through that path, those are all different places where you can introduce additional volume or gain at different stages going through that effects processing before it even leaves the Digitakt. Then that signal goes from the Digitakt into the analog rhythm, and the external in this specific machine enters just before the compressor. So on the compressor page, we've got a makeup gain where we can add additional volume, and we've got a volume of that, and we've also got our master volume, right? And then we've got an effects channel level. So we've got a whole bunch of different places where we can introduce additional volume and gain from within the analog rhythm as well. Then the signal goes out from the analog rhythm, mixed with everything that was coming out of that as well. So it's an additional signal, and that goes into the Octatrack. Okay, so that signal then goes into the Octatrack, and it goes in through C&D, and with the mix of C&D, we can actually add direct volume. Take that out or add it in. And then there's also gain. So it's another place to introduce volume or even it out. And then the way I have this set up is that we also have a master level. So throughout the signal path, we've got different places within the Digitakt that we can add volume or gain, where we have the potential to overdrive that signal and introduce distortion that we don't want to. Then we've got additional opportunities within the analog rhythm to be able to add additional gain or volume. Then once we get into the Octatrack, we've got more ways that we can add additional gain or volume. So all the way through the process, we have to be careful that we're not overdriving the signal at any one particular area. We also have, individual channel levels and master volumes on each of these as well. So there's a whole bunch of different places where we could potentially overdrive that signal in a way that we don't want to. So the key is to try and keep control of it all the way through that process so that we're not adding in anything anything additional that we don't want to. So that if we do want to add in some additional distortion, for example, with an overdrive, you can then compensate by reducing the volume. So you get all of the interesting harmonics that the overdrive adds in without adding additional volume of that signal going into the next piece of the chain. So as you can see throughout the process, there's a ton of different opportunities to overdrive your signal or introduce additional gain. When you start to add in compressors, you can overload those compressors, and then you have makeup gain, you have multiple signals going through things. So it's pretty easy to get the channel pretty cluttered up. So what you want to do is make sure that when you're trying to set your levels and you're trying to make sure that you're gain staging each sound and each signal path all the way through, that you're doing it from the very beginning where it's created all the way through every step of the way. If you look into the manual of whatever piece of equipment that you're using, most of them will show you what the signal path is for the audio signal through that. So it'll show you what is coming before and what's coming after it within the chain of effects within the processing. And so you can see the output of one is going to be the input of the next one. So you want to make sure that you're controlling each of those outputs along the way so that the input is coming in the way that you want it into the next level of the chain. So that way you're not having to worry about, did I mess something up way back at the beginning? And then all of a sudden, as we get to the end, it's too late to fix it. I hope this helped. I know that when I was going through the whole idea of trying to figure out why my mixes sounded muddy, this process took me a long time to find little bits and pieces of it from all over the internet and different videos and stuff. So I wanted to try and put together something to help you guys learn from the trial and error that I had to go through. So hopefully you don't have to go through that same trial and error to figure out gain staging on your own. And the more precise you are about this and the more methodical you are about this, it's not the most fun process, but the more methodical and precise you are about it, the better your end sound is going to be, the cleaner your end sound is going to be. So you don't have to worry so much about the output that you have at your final end, because you know every single thing along the way is a clean signal, or anything that you've introduced to it intentionally because it was where you wanted to and when you wanted to in the process, rather than having it be something that's out of control. So hopefully you got something out of this video. If you did, I'd love to have a subscribe to the channel. It definitely helps so that we can keep driving things and keep going and growing the channel. And if you've got some ideas of anything else that you'd like to see videos on, please put them in the comments down below. I'm happy to make videos on anything that you think might help. If it's something that I know, and if it's something that I don't know, I'm definitely happy to point you in the right direction of someone who knows it better than I do, because these are by no means the only way to do this stuff. This is the methods that I've been able to figure out over some time and some trial and error, and learning through a lot of these videos myself. I'm also going to link a couple of other videos up above here, so you can check those out if you'd like, and hopefully you get something out of those as well. Thanks very much for stopping by, and hope to see you in the next video. Peace.